The first new parts for the CB750 have arrived. Welcome to Hack a Week. So first up, I'd like to say a big thank you to everybody that donated last week to this project. A couple of people really hit me up with some super generous donations. You know who you are, and thanks a lot. It doesn't really matter about the amount, it's the idea that you care enough and like this content enough to actually support it with some monetary donations. If anybody wants to do that, just go to the Hack a Week website, click on the donate link, and do what you will with a few bucks. Thanks a lot. So earlier I checked out the bearing sizes on the crankshaft and on the connecting rods to figure out what I needed to order, and that's what's in this box. So let's take a look at that procedure and you'll see how I figured out what bearings I needed. So I've started a build logbook for the 73 CB750, and in here I will keep a record of everything I do on the bike, and I've already written down a few weights of what some of the things are, but we'll use this to record all of the sizes for the bearings and figure out what bearings we need to order. One of the trickier parts I've already noticed about this engine when it comes to the connecting rod bearings and the crankshaft bearings, it's not like every other engine I've worked on where you just pull the bearing, take a look at the number, run out and buy yourself one. You got to be really paying attention on the CB750s, and here's why. The crank and the case are matched up, okay? So you've got numbers stamped on here, you got numbers stamped on there. If everything was all put together original, it makes things a little easier. But here's how it all works. Basically, you've got a series of 5 letters stamped on the case. I'll show you where in a minute. And then on the center counterweight here on the crankshaft, there is engraved, like with a little electric buzzy engraving thing from the factory, 2 different stampings or engravings, and what they will tell you are the sizes of the crankshaft bearings and also the sizes of the connecting rod bearings. Now you have to correlate those 2 numbers together on some charts to come up with what color bearing to get. It gets pretty strange, but it all makes sense. If you'll follow along here, I'll show you. It took me about a day of research, really digging around to figure this out, and I finally downloaded a couple pages from a manual. I've got a better manual on the way. I've got one of the original reprints of a factory service manual coming, and lots of donations, by the way, in the last week. Thanks a lot for that. It's really helping out. So let's get onto these pages here, and I'll show you what all this number stuff deciphers into. The first one you'll look for is on the crankcase, located right here. Going to be a little difficult to see, I think. Well, there you go. B, B, A, B, B. Okay? So let's write that down. And we did, right here. We wrote that down. B, B, A, B, B. Left to right, just like it appears there. Okay. Now let's go over here to the crankshaft, and maybe you can see it on the video. It's so sketchy to see. You know, I'm going to rotate you upside down so that you're oriented in such a way where you can see these letters and maybe they'll make sense to you. Believe it or not, right there's a circle with the letter J in the middle of it. And then that's followed by A, 5 A's in a row. You could probably see them right there. If I rotate it further, there's another circle with a P in it, and that one says L 3333. So I wrote those numbers down right here. There's the numbers off from the crankshaft. Now, if we were to look at the crankshaft laid out like a main bearing here, main bearing, main bearing, main bearing, main bearing, 5 of them, and then these offset ones are the connecting rod points. Then we go to the connecting rods. The connecting rods have a mark on them. On one side right here, you can see this one. Maybe, yeah, let's find one you can see a little easier. Maybe this one here. That's a little better. There's a 1 on there. It's at a slant. So there's the number 1. On the other side is a letter. This one has a K on it. They all have K. That's a weight classification so that they're all within a certain spec of each other. So that number 1, you would write that down here. Okay, this is all your connecting rods. Left to right, you write down 1, 1, 1, 1. And where this this comes from is what we're going to figure out right now. I know it seems all real goofy, but it's going to make sense in a minute. Here's the chart. Here's the data. Let's show you how to plug it all in. First, let's start with the bearing stamp on the case. This is telling us the outside diameter of those bearings. B, B, A, B, B. Left to right from the generator side to the point side. So let's take one of the first ones here. Let's take B, alright? We'll go over here where it says crankcase, and we're going to find B. So there's B, and you'll notice there's 3 listings for B. It'll make sense in a second. Now let's go back over here. Take a look at the stampings for the main bearings. Actually, there should be 5 A's there. And we will see that we have A, okay? We have B, A. So we go here, we go B, and over here is A, so there's that combination. B with A would give us a green bearing. So right here in this first slot, we'll put a G for the green bearing. The next letter, B. Second letter down here, A. Guess what? Same thing, another green bearing right there. Third letter is an A. Third letter is an A. Now let's go back over here to the chart. Let's find the combination where we have A, and that would be a yellow bearing. So we'll put a yellow there, and then we keep going, and we have green and green, and that's where we end up with all of our main bearings. I need to order a set of green, green, yellow, green, and green. And those different letters are different oil clearances. That's very important. And we'll get a little bit more into that as time goes by. Now let's do the connecting rods. Same thing, except the table is laid out just slightly different. Over here we have the connecting rod and we have the crank pin. So we'll look at the connecting rod number first, which is a number 1 over here to the left, first one. And then we go up here to this listing that was stamped on the crankshaft for the connecting rods, and that's a 3. So we're looking for a 1-3 combination on the table. Go over here to the table, there's 1 on the connecting rod, 3 on the crank pin. That's a yellow bearing. So we'll put that down here, Y for yellow. And the next 3 are the same, 3 and 1, so they're all yellow. Now we have 2 and 3, so let's look for the 2-3 combination on the table. That would be right across here, and that's another green one. So we put it there, a green. So now for a grand total, I order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of green bearings, 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of yellow bearings. Put them all in, tighten everything up with plastic gauge, and check all the clearances, and I should be good to go. Now you understand all about those pesky bearings in a CB750. They drove me crazy when I first started researching this. So here's the packing sheet from Bike Bandit, and here's all the part numbers. So let's see if we can match all this stuff up. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bearings here, and they're all the same part number. Let's see if we can figure out what's what. Where is that part number? Here we go. This one, 133174255-003. That would be this one right here. Those are for the crankshaft, and those are the green bearings for the crankshaft. So let's go ahead and mark those. We run over here and grab a Sharpie, and we will just write on here green
crank. Oh, 2 more packages just showed up in the mail. Let's see what we got here. This one, I think, is the shop manual. Yep. Picked this up on eBay. Pretty reasonable price. And it's a Honda service manual for the CB750. And it's spiral ring bound, which is pretty cool. I think it's like a reprint of the shop manual. Wow, it's really nicely done though. That's awesome. This is good. This will have lots of good specs in it for the engine and all that jazz. Stuff about the wheels. Oh, by the way, I won't get to doing the truing of the wheels this week because I have to get a spoke wrench. I could do it probably with a small wrench. Don't want to do it with pliers because that will end up messing up everything and it'll look nasty. So I'll wait till I get that spoke wrench to do that. So that's one package. Let's see what the other one has in it. Sneezy. Oh no! Oh, it's air. Okay, what do we got here? We have, oh yeah, okay, Honda Bond. This is the stuff that you use on the metal to metal parts, like the case halves when they go together. Semi-drying liquid gasket. So that's the stuff we'll use on any of the places where there's no gasket, but it's just metal to metal, as in engine cases. All right.
Okay, finally got set up here on the other workbench, the old table saw. Did a lot of work here on the old Sabre. So we've got the engine up here now where it's at waist level, much easier to work on. Don't have to be squatting down and killing my knees on the concrete floor. Well, the first thing we have to do is clean up all this stuff. The guy put a bunch of assembly lube on there. No, it's not royal purple, it's assembly lube. So we'll take all that and wipe it all clean. We gotta get this crank completely dry and clean because what we're gonna do now is put on all of the new bearings, throw in some plastic gauge, and double check all the clearances to make sure that they are okay and within spec before we actually bolt everything together. I need to take all these rods off too. I've got one off already, and they have bolts in them. Look like this right here. They're called torque to yield bolts. They actually stretch a little bit when you tighten them up. I've got to look up the spec on them, but I think it's maybe 30 foot-pounds at the most, something like that. I have to look it up in the new book I just got. But these guys, you use them once. You never ever reuse torque to yield bolts. You're just asking for trouble. You might think it's okay, talk yourself into the fact that it's okay. It's not. They will probably break, and that would really suck. So I've got some new ones on the way, and it turns out you can use the ones from the later 750 F2. So I ordered some of those up. They should be here, yeah, I don't know when for sure. It's on back order, maybe in another week or so. But I can work around that for now because I've got lots of other things to do. But we can save these bolts and we can use them for sizing up the rod bearings and checking them with plastic gauge. So now I'm going to pull all of these off and keep them all in order because they have to go on a specific way. Like we saw earlier, this one is numbered 2, this one's numbered 1, this one's numbered 1, that one's numbered 1. So I've got to make sure I put them back in those proper locations. Let's rotate things around here where I can get at these nuts and start pulling these off. Just give them a little wiggle and they should come apart. There we go. We'll keep those aside right here. Just keep them lined right up with each one. Got all the rods pulled off, and we'll clean off all of these journals. Get them nice and clean, get all the oil off from them.
And then we'll go ahead and put the new rod bearings in with some plastic gauge, torque everything back up, and we'll double check our clearances. Well, you know what? I just had a little bit of a bummer moment here. I realized that when I ordered these up, and I ordered the rod bearings and the crank bearings, I had selected them as like, yeah, okay, give me one, thinking that would be one set, as in 2 shells. It's only 1 shell. So basically what I have to do is go back and duplicate that order, and then I'll have both sides. Damn, that's a bummer. Well, okay, anyway, I can still show you how the plastic gauge thing works, because I've got some yellow rod bearings, and so there's, you know, 1, 2, 3 of them. So I can take 2 of these and at least bolt them up and show you what's up with all of that. So let's see, I could refer back to my chart here. Left to right, I've got yellow, 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 green on the connecting rods, this being the left side of the engine. So I guess I can go ahead and put it on this one right here. We can put 2 yellow ones on there, and we'll go ahead and torque it up with a piece of plastic gauge in and double check that clearance. Here's the page where it talks about plastic gauging the rod end bearings, and 14.5 foot-pounds is the torque we need to go to. So let's stick a bearing on there, put some plastic gauge in, and torque it up. Let's get all the oil off from these, and then we'll pop out the old bearing. Just kind of put your thumbnail on there and pop them out. And I still want to keep these all separate. I don't want to just go throwing them around and losing track of where everything is. It's just a good idea always to keep things in a nice order as you go. Really pays off, believe me. Working on cars as long as I have, one of the things I do whenever I tear apart a car and I do some job on it where I'm replacing parts is I always keep all of the old parts until the car runs fine, gets picked up by the customer, and heads down the road. And then I'll go ahead and throw away the old stuff. But it's a good idea to hang on to things. Sometimes you need to refer to it. And with engine rebuilds and things like this, you got to make sure that you've got all your bearings the way they should be. So there's the 2 yellow rod bearings. I just popped them out of the package here. And when they're brand new, they look all nice and perfect. And you want to be really careful with them. Don't scratch them up. Don't scratch up the crank in any way whatsoever. Keep it all nice, clean, work slow, be careful. There's a little notch in the rod cap and in the rod right there. Little teeny notch. And when you put in the rod, you want to make sure that that notch lines up. I get really crazy clean about all this stuff when I do these. I make sure there's no dust, no anything on there when I pop them in place. I've always been that way when I do engine rebuilds. I've rebuilt lots of European stuff, lots of VW stuff, some Porsche 911, Porsche 930 stuff. So working on this stuff is kind of fun because it's small. Small, and you can do it on a bench top. You don't need an engine stand for it, really. I suppose you probably could use one. Okay, we've got that bearing shell installed there. We've got one in the cap, and what we'll do now is rotate this around and get a piece of plastic gauge right across here, and then we'll torque everything down. Let's see what we've got here. Well, the plastic gauge stuck to the bearing shell right there. You see it or not? It's a little tricky to see. There it is. See right there? A little bit of it. Let's put the gauge up against that and see what we have. Oh, that's pretty good. Looks like I'm at probably less than 2/1000ths of oil clearance there, so that's good, because 2/1000ths is about the limit of how far you want to go on the oil clearance. and that would mean that I would have to do some work on the crankshaft. But it looks like I'm at probably about something like that, about 1/1000th of an inch. So that's good news. Well, let's move on to a crankshaft bearing. This one right here takes a green bearing, and I do have 2 of those. So I can get all that cleaned off, pop out that lower shell and the corresponding shell in the top part of the case. We'll get that in there with a piece of plastic gauge, and we'll see just how that sizes up. I'm gonna do all of these once I get all of the bearings here, just to make sure they're all really good, and then we'll actually do the final assembly. But for right now, we'll just throw one in there just so we can see where the crank is at. So we can just park that there momentarily. We'll pop that shell out, clean all this off really well. We'll clean off the crankshaft, get all that oil off. Now let's get one of those bearing shells in there. Okay, now that that's in place, I can set the crank back in here very carefully. Oh. I'm going to leave the seal off the end for now. Put that on when we do our final build. Okay. All right, the top half of the case is right here, and we'll get the other bearing shell in there. Okay, that's in place. I've got the final drive held in place with a rubber band. Keeps it from falling down when you flip the case over. Now I'm going to put a piece of plastic gauge right there. Let's cut that out of our little packet. Oh, where'd it go? There it is. Stuff is tiny. There we go. Got that piece of plastic gauge in place. There it goes. Now we'll flip it over and get some case bolts in there and torque them up, take it apart, and take a look at that plastic gauge. Okay, all the bolts back out now. Okay, top case back off. So it looks like this one's just within the limit. And of course I think I'm on the right track here. We're just replacing them with the bearings I pulled out. So once I get all the rest of my shells, I'll go ahead and do all of the bearings and torque every one of these bolts down, all of the case bolts that go across here, crank them all down to spec, pull it all back apart, check it one more time, but I think I'm on the right track. I don't think I'm going to have to order any different size bearings. Okay, so we've got our preliminary check of the bearings done. Looks like we're on the right track, like I said, and I've just got to order up the rest of my bearings. And I've actually already done that. I went back to Bike Bandit to do that order again and decided to shop around a bit. Went over to Partzilla, looked up the same part numbers. You know what?
$40 cheaper for all the bearings I need. It was $118. That's just for half the bearings, right? From Bike Bandit. And the same parts over at Partzilla, $78. So Bike Bandit certainly does live up to their name. I don't think I'll be using them too much anymore, unless I absolutely have to. I also ordered a spoke wrench, a little spoke torque wrench, so that'll be handy. Well, I think that wraps up episode 3, and well, till next time. We need to measure all that up, and then we'll figure out what's up from there.